Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning. We ask that you send your Holy Spirit to this study, that you can convict our hearts and settle in our minds these truths. In Jesus' name, amen.
Esther's been in the context of the seven thunders, right? And we understand that the Manasseh being the seventh from the last seven kings of Judah, which is called the glorious land. Sister White says Manasseh was an earnest of what was to come, a down payment, and when he was carried into captivity in 677, he began the 25-20 time prophecy that ended in 1844. And Sister White says the history of the first and second angel's message, which is the history of 1798 to 1844, is the seven thunders. And Jesus illustrates the end with the beginning. So Manasseh representing being the king of the literal glorious land. It was a two-horned nation. It consisted of Judah and Benjamin. He represents a progressive fall of the glorious land, and he begins the 25-20 time prophecy that comes to the United States. The spiritual glorious land, which is going to have a progressive fall. And Sister White says the seven thunders represent a delineation of events that transpired in the first and second angels' messages, but it also relates to future events that will be disclosed in their order, which is our history, which is the history of 1989 to the Sunday Law. This glorious land here is the one king of Isaiah 23, that the papacy would be forgotten. Manasseh here, the beginning of this 25-20, represents forgotten. The beginning of this seven thunders, Manasseh, the forgetting of the papacy. Right here in Isaiah 23 says that when the papacy at the end of 70 years goes out and commits fornication with the kings of the earth, that she would be remembered. And this king in terms of Israel here is Zechariah, which means remembered. So from here to here, this is the days of one king, the 70 years. The one king is the glorious land. The glorious land goes through a progressive fall. In 1844, the first horn of Protestantism is given to Egypt, or is given to the king of the north. It's typified by Egypt in Ezekiel 29, verses 17 through 21. In our history, the second horn is conquered. So we are understanding now that the 11th hour workers also are governed by the last seven kings of Israel. What's Israel? Lots of good answers to that. But in relation to Judah, what's Israel? The northern kingdom. This is the northern kingdom. This is the southern kingdom. Where was Dan? Where was Dan?
Dan was in the ten kingdoms.
It was in the north. This is Dan. Where was Beersheba?
Beersheba was up on top in Judah.
It's in Judah. This is Beersheba. And we're understanding Dan and Beersheba. Is this history here? This history here, where the two sticks are joined. This being the last seven kings of the northern kingdom, typifying the 11th hour workers. But now we have four, we've come to understand four representations of the seven thunders. This is the seven thunders, seven thunders, seven thunders. But when it comes to Esther, we have seven Persian kings, beginning with Cyrus. Cambyses, false Smyrtus, Darius, Xerxes the Great, is that right? And then Artabanus. 1, 2, 3, yeah. Then Artabanus, and then Artaxerxes. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, correct? Everyone know this? Yeah. But these three in this history, we know that they line up with this seven thunders because this is the arrival of the first message, this is the arrival of the second, and this is the arrival of the third, and those three messages have been typified by these three kings who passed the three decrees. It began the 23, I guess you could do it this way to help illustrate it better. They began the 2300 year prophecy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that ended in 1844. In any case, these 7 Persian kings, that's kind of cool. What's kind of cool? That at this line of the 7 thunders, if you're looking at the 2300, that this would mean this first king here was typified by Cyrus. And the first angel's message, no doubt Christ, and Cyrus is type of Christ. So there's probably, it'd be nice to know what these kings' names mean, if you can, but it's more difficult to dig them out with any accuracy because they're Persian. And some of the Persian records don't even include this guy. And some of them have other guys in there.
There's a big dispute about that.
You have to pick it by sanctified logic, because sanctified logic allows you to see that these three kings are the first, second, and third angel's message typified. Therefore, you've got the prophetic justification for selecting your historical figures to find the 7 kings, even though history has some arguments in there. Prophecy says it was 7. But it'd be nice to know what their names were. But unimportant at this point. So when we're looking at this history, we're seeing that what's emphasized on these 7 thunders is the decrees. This 7 thunders from Manasseh to Zedekiah is a progressive fall of the glorious land. This 7 thunders is the beginning and the ending of Adventism. But who knows what all's in here? The parable of the 10 virgins, the repetition of it, the fall of the United States, which is the 6th kingdom of Bible prophecy in Revelation 17. So when we're dealing with Esther, we have determined that what have we determined? This is the Sunday law. This is the universal Sunday law. And this is the death decree. We mark these by the Bible and Spirit of prophecy. So the Sunday law, the United States is removed as the 6th kingdom of Bible prophecy. So what begins simultaneously? So the 6th begins with the 7th. Now, it begins the 7th. Because of the way it's described, there's a logic that leads us to believe sometimes without thinking about it, that when the universal Sunday law, when every country in the globe has passed the Sunday law, that this is when Michael stands up. We understand that, but there's a logic to think that that this is when the 1 hour begins of Bible prophecy. The 10 kings agree to give their kingdom to the beast. We're taking the agreement of the 10 kings with the papacy and making the assumption, which is not justified, that this takes place when every country has passed the Sunday law. I don't think there's any justification for it, and Bible prophecy teaches you otherwise. Because right here, at the Sunday law in the United States, this is when the 11th hour workers join the work, and they're the 1 hour laborers. So the fact that the 11th hour workers are the 1 hour laborers This is giving you the second witness of when the 1 hour is that the 10 kings agree to give their kingdom to the beast. It begins here, even though every country on the globe has not passed a Sunday law. And when you approach it this way, then it's more, it fits better, because if you go through everywhere that Sister White addresses Satan personating Christ, there's something that you will find, maybe several things, but something that you'll find. Satan never is illustrated in the spirit of prophecy as personating Christ before the Sunday law in the United States. Whenever he's personating Christ, it's always after the Sunday law in the United States. And that's in agreement with Revelation 13, because in Revelation 13:11, the United States speaks as a dragon in verse 11. That's the Sunday law. And then in verse 13, you see Satan personating Christ, because he's bringing fire down out of heaven in the sight of men. And in Great Controversy, when Sister White comments on Revelation 13:13, she says this is Satan. So Satan appears after the Sunday law in the United States, personating Christ. And when you read what he's doing when he's personating Christ, what is the primary thing he's doing?
Bringing fire down.
No, that's not the primary thing he's doing. What's she commenting on? He's telling the nations of the world that they need to pass a Sunday law. Okay, so in this history, there's a progressive enactment of the Sunday laws in the countries, and that's what Satan's doing primarily in here. But Sister White says at the Sunday law, and the Bible says, the United States takes the hand of Rome. But in some places, she says simultaneously, the United States is taking the hand of spiritualism, the dragon power. So the threefold union is coming together right here. Okay, right when the United States falls, the 10 kings are coming into unity with the papacy.
Sister White points out that through spiritualism, basically bringing out old apostles as if they were coming back to life, walking the street, telling the people that Saturday has been changed to Sunday.
Right. That's after the Sunday law.
Yeah, after the Sunday.
There will be false healings and these types of manifestations before the Sunday law, but not to the extent that takes place here. So what I'm saying here, this is the 1 hour of Revelation 17, and somewhere in here, maybe simultaneously at the Sunday law, the 10 kings immediately thereafter agree to give their kingdom to the beast.
Yeah, you can see that in a sense because the United States is the premier, representation of the 10 kings, and he becomes. The United States falls, and then it's part of the 10 kings. So the United States is a representation of the 10 kings. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's a reason. There's an inspired reason that I don't fully understand. Maybe none of us fully understand. That you can show that the 10 kings are giving their kingdom right there at the Sunday law in the United States, but you can also show that they're not. And what I mean by that, it's portrayed as a sequential event. In Revelation 17, it's the 6th, 7th, and then the 8th is of the 7. There's a sequence that's illustrated there. There's something that inspiration is trying to teach us about retaining this domino effect. But in any case, as soon as they give their kingdom to the beast for 1 hour, the 8th kingdom is underway, and then the death decree takes place when? When Sunday law, how does she say it? Something like when Sunday laws become universal, what happens?
National disaster.
No, when the Sunday laws become universal, Michael stands up. This is Daniel 12:1. The close of human probation. What's this? This is the death decree, right? When does it come? It's pretty obvious. When does it come?
After Michael spent
In the 7 last plagues.
Yeah, that's the last plague.
Okay, so we can read into this. There's a decree, a universal decree, maybe, but there's definitely a decree at the Sunday law. And there's a decree here. So we know from correct Adventist understanding, there's a decree here, and a decree here. And what we're saying is in the history of these 7 thunders, of these 7 Persian kings, which possess the history of the first, second, and third decree, that this king here, Xerxes the Great, okay, Ahasuerus, however you want to pronounce it, that in his history of Esther, we have, I'm going to put it over here.
5 decrees.
We have 5 decrees. Okay. I'm not trying to do this proportionately. So now, this is Esther here, the story of Esther, that is taken, it's a fractal from right there, from Xerxes the Great history, and it's about the decrees. So we mark this at 9/11 in the story of Esther, this being the midnight cry, and this being the Sunday law. But we know down here there is the 4th decree. Let's deal with them. How many decrees do we mark at 9/11?
3.
Why?
Because of Shushan.
Well, we say that we can do it by the logic of Esther because they're given from Shushan. But what's the prophetic justification for marking all 3 decrees right here?
When
3
Ezra
is
comes out of Babylon, he has the 3rd decree, which contains all of it.
Ezra 7:9. Okay, so they're all there. And what's the first decree in the story of Esther?
Divorce.
Divorce. Second decree.
Gathering.
What? Gathering.
Gathering of virgins.
How many gatherings of the virgins are there in the book of Esther?
2.
So, where do they take place in the book of Esther?
House.
They take place 3 places. There's 2 gatherings, but they take place 3 places. Why?
There's 2 gatherings, but it takes place in 3 places.
Yes, why?
Fractal.
Because of a fractal. There's a gathering right here that is going to be the first gathering in either case. But at the large level, there's a gathering here. The second gathering here is at the Sunday law. Because this is where the 50 Millerites moved into the most holy place with Christ in fulfillment of the parable of the 10 virgins. But there's a fractal of this. This is the marriage of Xerxes the Great and Esther. But there's a gathering here in the fractal level. This is the second gathering at the big level. And this is the second gathering at the fractal level. Right? Everyone remember this? Feasts. How many feasts were there? How many feasts? Let's just, instead of answering that question, let's remind ourselves what they were. How long was Xerxes' feast?
180 days.
180 days?
Plus 7 days.
Plus, almost there. Plus what?
2 7.
7 days, but they're double. There's
Right.
2
One for Vasquez and one for
his
his, right?
in the courtyard. So the feasts are doubled here for 7 days. Mordecai tells, what's her name? Esther, about what decree?
The 10th decree for the Jews.
Which one?
The 3rd.
4th.
No.
No. 3rd?
Tells them about
It's the 3rd because
the 3rd decree.
Yeah,
It's the 3rd one, yeah.
And where does he tell her about it? Where is she when she gets the information from him?
she's in the midnight cry.
She's right here, okay? And how long does she ask them to pray and fast for?
3 days.
So that's the 3-day testing process of this history. And what does Revelation 14 mark these 3 steps at?
First, second,
The
third angel's
everlasting
messages.
gospel?
Is it Revelation 14? Yeah, it's first, second, third angel's message. But where do we find called, chosen, and faithful?
At the end of that chapter.
17.
17, there you go. Okay. And this is the called, chosen, faithful. And what did Esther tell Mordecai when he tells her,
If I die, I die.
I was not called.
if I perish, which puts it right here. I perish, you got a double. But what did she say?
She wasn't called for those 30 days
What 30 days?
from 9/11 to the midnight cry.
So she's marking this as 30 days also, not just 180. She wasn't called in this history. Who's called in this history? The priests. Who's called in this history?
The Levites.
The priests. Is it I-E or E-I?
I.E.
Yes.
I before E, except after C.
And the Levites.
Other exceptions.
Okay, so at one level, here what is Esther? Is she? She wasn't called in this history. She says, I wasn't called in the history of the
She's a
priest.
Levite.
She's a Levite.
That's right.
Okay, that's okay. So she represents the Levites. How does she represent the priests?
In the sense that she was gathered back there.
And she was
As
chosen
Yeah,
as the
yeah. She was gathered here in her. How long did she?
12 months.
12 months. Okay, so the marriage here, this is also a fractal, right?
Yeah.
There'd be 12 months here. And also, because this works as a fractal, 12 months here.
And I think that 12 months and 12 months is what allows us to understand the gatherings, right? The gatherings.
The
are
two, the
connected.
fractal of the
Yeah.
two gatherings. So what is Esther in this story? She's both. Okay, the reason I'm saying that is because Tyler wanted to tell us repeatedly about what concerning Ruth. What's Esther at the basic prophetic level?
She's a church.
She's a church, she's a woman. What's Ruth at the basic prophetic level?
The church.
Church.
She's a church. And so if you remember, Tyler kept throwing in something about Ruth. What was he throwing in? Don't say, because I know you know.
I don't remember what it said.
He was saying
Sort
that she's primarily representing the 11th hour workers.
Okay, so he was saying that Ruth represents the 11th hour workers, which is true, because Ruth is Sardis. But that Esther, that Mordecai related to Esther. Mordecai was a priest when he was calling Esther to service here as a Levite, Esther being a Levite. So Mordecai's relationship when Esther is typifying a Levite is the same as Naomi's relationship to Ruth when Naomi is a what?
Levite.
She's someone that comes in this history, and she's relating to Ruth as 11th hour worker. So the relationship of Naomi and Ruth has been typified by Mordecai and Esther. Okay, but when you bring these two women together, two symbols of the church, what's being taught? The priests, Levites, the 11th hour workers.
The stick coming together?
The stick coming together is in there for sure, but I mean in terms of what classes of people they represent as women. Everyone got that? Do you? Okay, so we're adding Ruth into this now. What else do we want to put into Esther? Okay. So where is the fourth decree in the book of Esther?
It's at the Sunday law.
At the Sunday law. What's happened there?
Gallows are being
Decree that
made.
gives them the freedom.
Wrong.
No, it's the.
They're made. Sorry, they've already been made.
When were the gallows made? Let's do with the gallows first.
At the midnight cry, they were being set up.
Yeah, it is. It's after the death of Haman. She goes to the king, and he says, "You want anything else?" He says, "Yeah, I want the Haman's 10 sons to be hung up on a gallows, and I want God's people to be able to defend themselves against Haman's wicked decree, because it can't get reversed even though Haman's dead, because it's a law of the Medes and the
So is
Persians."
there 5 decrees in that?
Yes,
Or
and then the
6?
5th decree is Mordecai and Esther, on the witness of 2, putting in place that they were to commemorate this Lot feast.
That's the death decree?
No, the death decree is here. That's the
What
4th
about the
decree.
National Sunday Law?
That's this one. Well, I don't know that you can really. Yeah, that's this one. That's the 3rd decree.
The National Sunday Laws?
What's the difference in the story of Esther between the national Sunday law and the universal Sunday law?
Oh, wait.
There is none in the book of Esther.
Oh.
What typifies the Sunday law in the book of Esther? The hanging of Haman. And this is the gallows that gets built from the midnight cry to the Sunday law. Okay, and when you get to the Sunday law, Haman is hung. That's the noose. I don't have a body in there. Right? And then after that, after Haman's dead, which is the Sunday law, who gets hung?
The 10 kings.
His dead.
He's 10. the
No,
10
no. Who gets hung? Judas gets hung. Who else gets hung? You know, there's other people in the scriptures get hung. They're going to get
Saul's sons.
Saul's sons. But anyway, Haman's getting hung here, marking the Sunday law, the arrival of the Sunday law. Christ gets hung up on a cross, which is the Sunday law. But Absalom gets hung up on a tree. Yes. Anyway, I'm saying that this is marking this event, but who built the gallows?
He did.
Why?
'Cause he
To
wanted-
hang Mordecai.
But why did he build it?
Because his
His
wife.
His wife.
Just-
Okay, so who's Haman?
United States.
And who's his wife?
Protestantism.
Protestant. So who are they? They're both the United States. What are they?
Church and state.
They're the 2 horns. Haman's the Republican horn. What's his name? His wife's name? Zeresh?
Yeah.
She's the Protestant horn. She's the one that directs him to build the gallows. That's the setting up of the image of the beast from here to here. And then he's hung on it. And then the king asks Esther, I don't know if he asked her. I think he asked her, but I don't know the exact words. Is there anything else you want done?
Your request.
And she says, yes. So we place this 4th decree in this history. And what did she want done?
She wants them to be able to defend themselves and the sons to be hung.
And the sons to be hung. And they
But the sons were already dead.
the hanging of the sons takes place in what period of time?
In the universal death decree.
They died before.
But that's not what I'm looking for. There's 3 days, isn't there? Is it the 13th, 14th, and 15th, or the 14th, 15th,
yeah.
and 16th?
13, 14, and 15.
Okay, so you have 3 days down here, 13th, 14th, and the 15th, that this history's taken place. When do the 10 sons die?
On the 13th.
On the 13th. But when do they get hung?
On the last day.
The 14th, I guess.
The 15th.
The 14th.
I don't sure that it's marked. I'm not sure that I remember it, but we did note a distinction between their death and their hanging. Why is that important for us?
Because
It is also teaching what? Just like Revelation 17.
They could happen at the same time, or
It's
it could be
it's
progressive.
progressive. Who are the 10 sons?
10 kings.
They're the 10 kings. They die before they're hung on the cross or hung on the gallows. So that is the death of the 7th kingdom that leads to the next day, which is what?
they're hung.
Yeah, but what is it?
Oh, the universal Sunday.
That's here. Okay, they die somewhere here. They're hung on the gallows here, and then the deliverance takes place. So these 3 days of deliverance in the story are going to be commemorated by what?
Pure.
The 5th decree. And how long do they commemorate it for?
2 days.
2 days. They take 2 days to commemorate these 3 days. And of course this is a bit obscure, but what are the 2 days? What commemorates?
The first and second in his message.
You're almost there. What commemorates? What does this 5th decree, what are you commemorating when you commemorate Purim? What is Purim?
The casting of lots.
Casting of lots. What is the casting of lots?
Judgment.
Judgment. What 2 days represent judgment?
The Day of Atonement and
The two,
Passover.
the 2 days from 1798 to 1840.
The 7 thunders. This is the opening of the judgment. This is the close of the judgment. The 7 thunders are the 2 days that commemorate judgment. So the capstone, the 5th decree in the story of Esther, is the death decree. But because it's commemorated for 2 days, it's the 7 thunders which is marking it. So what does that do for us? When we have the story of Esther and Ruth in place, what do we have? Over here, we have 5 decrees. Decree, and we're saying there was a decree at 9/11. What would that decree be?
Patriot Act.
Patriot Act. So what are we saying about the midnight cry?
That there's going to be a decree.
That there's going to be a decree. So we don't know exactly what that decree is. But this is evidently what the line of the tribe of Judah is opening up to his people at this time. We have some sanctified speculation. But now back to something that Tanya said. In this history, I was asking what do the 2 women represent when Esther represents the priests and the Levites and Ruth represents the 11th hour workers. But what did Tanya say that these stories represent? The joining of the 2 sticks. Okay, so when you start looking at the joining of the 2 sticks, what have we come to understand is the symbol of the joining of the 2 sticks?
Dan and Beersheba.
Dan and Beersheba. Dan is the northern kingdom. Beersheba is the southern kingdom, and they're joined in the history of the midnight cry, or the image of the beast test. This being Zedekiah, for better. Is it Z-E-D-E?
Yeah.
And this being, what is this? Jeroboam 2. Jeroboam 2 for Dan, and Zechariah. So this is the place they get joined in here. This being the image of the beast test, the midnight cry. We're learning that. And when we looked at Dan and Beersheba, what did we recognize from 2 Chronicles chapter 30 when Hezekiah, or Jehoshaphat, was it Jehoshaphat or Jehoshaphat?
Hezekiah.
Hezekiah, when Hezekiah was going to have a second Passover.
He calls the northern tribe
He
down.
calls Dan to come to the second Passover. Okay? Where do we get justification for a second Passover?
Numbers.
In Numbers chapter 9. It's okay to have a second Passover For what? There's two purposes that justify a second Passover.
If you're defiled by
Dead body
For traveling.
or traveling on a long journey. In the history of 9/11 to the Sunday law, can you travel on a long journey?
No,
No. Why not?
the
Turn time.
cloud is there.
Because the cloud comes down at 9/11 and it doesn't move until the Sunday law. And when the cloud comes down on the sanctuary, what does it mean to Israel?
Stay.
They have to stay in their tent. So we marked Ruth's story at 9/11. What did Elimelech do at 9/11?
Travel.
He took a long journey. He rebelled against the message of 9/11. And of course, this story with Ruth is the story of the joining of the 11th hour workers with God's people. So it's the story of Dan and Beersheba. And where do we first see Beersheba mentioned in the scriptures? Genesis 21.
The well.
Yeah, in Genesis 21, the well is the second part, but what's the very first reference? It's in the same chapter.
Abraham?
Coming into an agreement.
Well, yeah, but what's the story?
Abraham lied about his wife.
Well, they get too big a story. It's when Hagar was what?
Oh.
She was cast out, and she thought she was going to die, and she put Ishmael over there, and she went and started dealing with the Lord that she was going to die, and the Lord promised her he was going to make Ishmael a mighty nation. And where was she when this took place? She's in the way of Beersheba. That's chapter 1 of Genesis. And in chapter 21 of Genesis, before it's over, what is there? Brother Michael, what is there in chapter 21 before it's over? After the story of Hagar and Ishmael being in the way of Beersheba, and Hagar and Ishmael are in Galatians 4 are typify those that are cast out. They're the bondwomen. They're the Laodiceans. What do we have happen in the story of the casting out of the Laodiceans in chapter 21?
There's an oath at the well.
No, before you get there.
Oh.
There's a famine.
Oh,
There's a famine. Okay, so there's a famine, and Abraham interacts with who? Naomi's husband. Naomi's husband is Elimelech. Abraham is going to have an interaction with Elimelech, a different Elimelech, hundreds of years before, but it's still Elimelech and his general named Phicol, right? Okay, so in Genesis 26, what do you have?
The same thing.
You have a famine, only it's not Abraham, it's who? It's Isaac. And Isaac's going to have an interaction with who? Elimelech and who? His general, Phicol. Okay, so they're two parallel stories. And in those stories, what does both Abraham and Isaac do? They lie. About what? Their wives. Okay, it's about, I don't know everything it's about, but who ends up with Sarah and Rebecca? Is it Rebecca? It's Rachel.
The king of that.
Elimelech, in both cases, ends up with their wives because they lied, and then the Lord intercedes and they get their wives back, right? So the story is something about an unlawful marriage relationship, probably.
Abraham lied twice. Once
Yes,
and once.
yes. He lied, and when he lies the second time with Elimelech, he's already had his second covenant agreement with the Lord. He's already sacrificed Isaac, or went through the steps. So this is like, it's put in the record because you need to see that Abraham and Isaac are the beginning of the story of Beersheba, and they're two parallel histories. So what are they? It's Millerite history, Abraham, the famine of the Millerite history, and Isaac is our history.
I want to take you back and point something out with Genesis 21. When the Egyptian woman is sent away, she gets to a point that her water's consumed, and basically she's gonna let it die. The baby died. There's no food. There's no water. So you can put that out that they're dying of famine. There's nothing to eat.
Yeah.
And then later on, God opened up her eyes.
But he's not a
She saw
baby
well.
anymore. Go ahead.
Yeah, and she said that God opened up her eyes and she saw a well of water on the way to Beersheba. So there's a well also there for Hagar.
Yeah, the inference is that this is the well of Beersheba.
Why is it FICO and both the same as why it's the general and both? FICO is the name for like a sub.
That's a name for a general.
Oh, so FICO.
Elimelech's the king.
King and
FICO's the general.
I never
All I'm saying is there's prophetic markers in there to make sure that you understand that these two stories are parallel stories, and Abraham is the Millerites, and Isaac is the 144,000. Okay, this is the beginning and ending of Adventism because all the prophecies are illustrating the end of the world.
And why is Naomi in the middle of it?
And this is the story of Beersheba, and it's the story of Elimelech, and Elimelech from Ruth ties us into Beersheba, and Ruth is telling the story of how the two sticks come together, and the two sticks are Dan to Beersheba, the northern kingdom, the southern kingdom. So you're not going to have to get up and explain that level on Sunday, but we're at least touching these things, right? So,
Is there any significance that the U.S. Patriot Act has 10 sections to it, and it also has an acronym, some kind of acronymal name that is 10 letters long?
probably. I never knew that, so I wouldn't have an
It's
answer.
USA Patriot. They have, the U.S. Patriot stands for, each letter of that stands for something. It's like protection.
Yeah, it's a
Uniting
backronym.
is, so uniting and strengthening, the A is, or the and it doesn't stand for. Uniting, strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. Act of 2011.
Yeah, they came up with U.S. Patriot Act, and then they went backwards and made it say something that matched the act.
And there's
It's a
10
background.
sections. There's like 10
That's
Patriot
kind of
Acts.
like prophetic.
Yeah, they define it. So,
No, no doubt, there's something there. But in the story, we got to see the story of Dan and Beersheba in the story of Ruth.
It just would be more reason to realize that would be a marker. Because
Yeah.
it's such a big,
It's a marker.
yeah.
What happened at the Patriot Act?
Lost the freedom. The wall was taken down.
The wall's taken out to Sunday law. What happened at the Patriot Act?
English law reversed to Roman.
Yeah, we went from English law to Roman law, which is the very essence of the Constitution. What is Roman law?
You're guilty.
Guilty before proven innocent.
And in English law is?
Innocent before proven guilty.
Okay, that happened here. Now, I now remember why I was going to Dan to Beersheba. In 2 Chronicles 30, when Hezekiah called for a second Passover, Ruth, in the story of Ruth, they went on a long journey. And her husband and her sons die. And you see in her daughter-in-laws the everlasting gospel. One daughter is going to become part of the 11th hour workers, and the other holds on to the doctrines of Moab. Naomi is the people, the Levites that come in this crisis, the Adventists. Ruth's the 11th hour workers. But the two sticks are getting joined here. And the 11th hour workers are from Sardis. And what is it? What's one of the characteristics of Sardis?
They're alive, but they're dead.
They appear to be alive, but they are dead. And what was one of the reasons that you could partake in a second Passover?
Dead bodies.
If you've been defiled by dead bodies. And what had happened to the garments of the people in Sardis? What's it say? Their garments were defiled. Okay, so Sardis is those that have been defiled by death that have an opportunity to come in at the second Passover, which is Sunday law. What's the first Passover?
9/11.
9/11. Why is 9/11 the first Passover?
Because we can show the cross at
Because
9/11.
they came out of Egypt.
What's celebrated at Passover? What day is it celebrated on? I hate giving you guys so much
The 14th.
clues. Oh, the 14th. What's celebrated next? The 15th. What's the 15th?
The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread.
What's the 15th? It's unleavened bread.
Yeah.
If you don't have any leaven in your bread, sisters, what doesn't it do?
Doesn't rise.
Did Jesus rise on the 15th?
No.
No, he's in the grave. They're celebrating him being in the grave, unleavened bread. He doesn't rise till the next day. What happens at the midnight cry?
That's when he stands up. That's when he
So many answers, but in terms of Jesus not being resurrected on the 15th, what happens on the 15th at the midnight cry?
Lazarus.
Lazarus is resurrected. So the fact that he's not resurrected is teaching that there's a resurrection that takes place here. But this is the 14th, this is the 15th. What is the Sunday law? It's the 16th. What is it?
First fruit.
It's the Feast of the First Fruits. So how are the fruits developed? They're developed in these two histories, right? So this is the first Passover. What's the second Passover?
Sunday.
It's the Sunday law. Who is it for? It's for Ruth, because she's from Sardis. She has a name that she liveth. Do the Protestant churches in the United States think they're alive?
Yeah.
But they're dead. They've got defiled garments, but they can participate in the second Passover if they wake up to what's going on here in the image of the beast testing time and do what? What do they have to do if they're going to participate in the second Passover?
Listen to what Naomi's telling
They have to submit to Naomi's wisdom.
I don't understand how Lazarus is raised at midnight cry and then the first fruit at Sunday law. I guess I'm mixing up.
When's he resurrected?
Well, Lazarus resurrected before Jesus even goes to the cross.
When's Jesus go to the cross? What leads Jesus to the cross? The triumphal entry. Okay? Who is leading the ass?
Well, I know Lazarus is.
So he's got to get resurrected here in order to lead the triumphal
Well, we've
entry.
already made Jesus dead on midnight cry. And he's resting. in the grave.
Different line of thought.
Different line.
He's overlaying.
I'm
two lines
taking
of
different
thought.
lines to draw out the characteristics of those lines to help us think through this process. One line does not destroy another. It just magnifies
Because
it.
we can show the cross at 9/11, and midnight cry, Sunday law, closing probation.
Yeah, you
You can show the cross at every.
You can show Pentecost here. It's.
But when we overlap them, that's where it might be confusing. But that's what you got to do in order to bring out the full story, is overlap all the different lines.
And real quick, remind me why we're saying 14, 15, and 16.
When were they to keep the Passover?
The 14th day.
On the 14th day of the first month. And when were they to keep the Feast of Unleavened Bread? On the 15th.
The first day of the feast.
The first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When were they to keep the first fruit, celebrate the first fruit offering? The 16th.
Okay.
And he's making a distinction that only needs to be made for those people that are fighting that distinction. But yeah, that's correct. All right, so when we're looking at all this, what did we learn about the second Passover in 2 Chronicles 30?
The northern tribes came to this Passover.
Why?
Because they were called to come to this Passover by letters.
How were they called? By a decree. In another verse says letter, but it says a decree. So what's that do?
It shows that
Another
there's a second
It
witness.
places a decree right here. You may not have the definition for it yet, but there is a decree marked at this waymark in 2 Chronicles 30. And the decree is the call to the Sunday law, the call to the second Passover. And it has to come before the Sunday law, before the second Passover, because it's a call to it. So it's a decree before the Sunday law decree. 2 Chronicles chapter 3. Right? Go ahead.
In 2 Chronicles chapter 30, when they have the second Passover, I read it again this morning. In that particular story, the priests and Levites had not even kept the first Passover. They had to keep the second Passover with the 11th hour workers. So I was wondering if you knew what that is signifying at the Sunday law for with the second, because we can prove prophetically that there's a Passover from 9/11 to the Sunday law. We know that that's sound. So there's the first and the second. But that time, in that particular story, the priests and Levites couldn't keep it because they weren't sanctified until the point when they could call all of them. They'd missed the mark just by a couple days. Because they finished sanctifying on the 16th day. They had just missed it by a couple days.
Right.
But verse
You know-
23 makes it sound like they did keep it, because it says, and the whole assembly took counsel to keep others 7 days. As
Oh.
if they had kept.
No,
That's
that's
in
after
the
the second Passover.
Yeah.
They wanted to celebrate that they've had such a high mountaintop experience. No, what he's saying is, in 2 Chronicles 29, they begin to cleanse the sanctuary on the first day of the first month. That's 9/11. But they cleanse the temple in how many days?
8 days.
8 days.
Oh yeah,
And the courtyard, how many days?
8 days.
When did they begin?
on the first day of the first month.
On the first day of the first month. So when did they finish cleaning the temple and the courtyard?
16th
On the
day of first
16th.
month.
So when are they supposed to keep Passover?
The 14th.
On the 14th day of the first month. There's no way they could have kept Passover because the sanctuary wasn't prepared for a holy convocation until 2 days after Passover was supposed to be observed. So you know they didn't keep it either. They're going to keep the second one. And my answer to you is I don't know why that is the case, but I think it's typifying, it's purposeful in order to illustrate the second Passover in the scriptures so we can see this like we're seeing.
Yeah. No, I think it's purposeful because we know that there's the first Passover from 9/11 to the Sunday law that can be shown to multiple witnesses. So.
Yeah, and I think we're at least saying something incorrect from what I was seeing this morning. We're associating this history, 9/11, to the midnight cry with the priest, and the midnight cry to the Sunday law with the Levites, and that's correct. That's sound. But we've been trying to teach that one of the reasons that we're doing that is that the priests are cleansed first, and then the Levites are cleansed. I think the priests and the Levites are cleansed simultaneously in the scriptures. And the distinction isn't between the purification of the priest and the Levites, and it's a 1-2 step process because the scripture says they're purified at the same time. The distinction is the work that the priests do and the work that the Levites do. The Levites are associated with the court. The priests are associated with the temple. It's still sound, but the scriptures teach us that the priests and Levites are purified simultaneously. And what would that be teaching? That the priests and Levites together go to make up what?
First fruit.
The first fruit offering, and they're purified. The first fruit are gathered together or whatever in this history.
That zooms us out on like a larger scale from 9/11 to the Sunday law, so you can see it's all just one 3-step testing process. But when you split it down, you can see the distinctions being made.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is I can't find anything in the scriptures that teaches that the priests are
Separate.
purified first
Yeah.
and then the Levites. The only way you can make that distinction is by the work that was assigned them. The priests took care of the temple and the Levites the courtyard.
2 Chronicles 29:34. Actually, suggesting that what he's saying is not so right. What it says, but the priests were too few, so they could not flay all the burnt offerings. Wherefore their brethren the Levites did help them till the work was ended, until the other priests that sanctified themselves. For the Levites were more upright in heart to sanctify themselves than the priest. And right here it says that the priests were not sanctified. So basically saying that the Levites were more right than the priests. But the priests were not ready to do the work.
There was
The
too
Levites
many,
were.
there was too few of them though, not that they weren't sanctified, right? Just that the numbers were
No,
not.
it says right here, more upright and hard to sanctify themselves than the priest.
Yeah, but I think you're reading something a little bit incorrect in there. The few priests that were there,
The Levites.
the few priests that were there were upright in heart and they sanctified themselves. But there wasn't enough of them to keep up with that many sacrifices. So the Levites had to help because in a general sense, the Levites had a better heart to respond than did the priests. Where do we see that? Where is that illustrated? If you forget the priests and the Levites and go to the time of Christ, who are the priests?
The 12.
They're the disciples?
Yeah.
Okay, how many categories of disciples are there?
2.
And what are they?
The 12 and the 7.
The 12 and the 70. There's a larger number that comes into this group than here.
So there wasn't enough in the
it's-
first group.
The same thing is illustrated again for the 11th hour workers when Sister White illustrates our experience, the people, the first fruit from 9/11 to the Sunday law to the 11th hour workers. She says they're going to surpass us in zeal and ability, like Paul did for the disciples. He was the greatest evangelist.
Where, if from 9/11 to the Sunday law, where do you see that in Revelation 7? It's 144,000. I mean, there's a caveat to that we all know, we won't go into. Where do you see the 11th hour workers?
The great multitude.
The great multitude. And what does it say about the great multitude? No man can number them.
Yeah.
There's such a big number of the 11th hour workers in relation to the 144,000.
That shows
And
an
it was the
escalation
Levites,
just
right?
like Islam.
The
More
priests and
men.
Levites together. Yeah, it's progressive. Less priests than Levites, less Levites than 11th hour workers.
And it makes perfect sense because we know that the laborers are few in this period of time. And we know that in the midnight cry, it will swell and there will be more. But right now, there are few
Yep.
in the vineyard working the true message.
Why?
Well, it goes along
Because the
with
people that are
this.
being called, there's people being called in here, they're not, what did it say? The priests
They're
were,
not as zealous as
yeah, she read
The
it.
Levites were more upright in the heart to sanctify themselves, and then I guess they were not enough.
The priests that are being called are not so
The priests were too
upright
few.
in heart.
Yeah, and then right here on 33 it says, for they could not keep it at that time because the priests had not sanctified themselves sufficiently, and that the people were not gathered themselves together at Jerusalem. And in the first letter when Hezekiah sent out, he sent out letter to all Israel, to Judah, but he also included specifically Ephraim and Manasseh. But then the second time, he includes the whole Israel.
Well,
How come they're not upright in heart?
Laodiceans, perhaps.
Coming out of that Laodicean life. Okay,
So I just want to put in there, in 2 Chronicles 30, we got this decree marked. We have a witness for that. Now,
When we read upright in heart, I don't know if we understand that correctly, because like you're saying, the context of the verse is that there were too few.
yes.
There wasn't enough of them. And when you killed, I wonder if that's in the law, I'm not sure, but maybe somebody else knows. When you killed the lamb, you had to probably go through a cleansing process before you killed more. So you can't just go and just start slaying lambs as fast as you can go. I think there's like a process of cleansing as you're doing that. That's what, when you're reading it, it kind of sounds like they couldn't, it says they didn't
have
do
the
it.
manpower.
They didn't have the manpower. And they couldn't cleanse themselves. Like the priest, you go in, you offer, then you have to go back out, and there's probably some sort of cleansing process that you have to go through before you offer again.
Probably is not a very good word.
Okay.
The
Well,
very last word too tells us that we can mark it at the Sunday law because it says suddenly.
This thing happened suddenly.
Yeah.
And not when the Lord comes suddenly to his temple, you can lay out October 22nd, 1844. So it's another
So
marker.
when this happened suddenly, you're going to Malachi 3, verse 3, when the messenger of verse 1 will suddenly come to his temple. And that's October 22nd, 1844, which is typifying the Sunday law. Right? Okay, so in this history here of these, we're marking 3 decrees. One of them is a question mark. Maybe we need to be corrected about the Patriot Act, but we're going with the Patriot Act at 9/11 for the first decree, right? And we know there's a decree at the midnight cry now because what we understand about Dan to Beersheba, Hezekiah's decree, come to the second Passover. This is the Sunday law decree. So, was Islam active in 1989?
Mm-hmm.
Was Islam active at 9/11?
Yes.
Is Islam going to be active at the midnight cry?
Yes.
How do we show that?
Through
Right
Revelation
there,
9.
that testimony of 2.
No, but there's nothing about Islam in here.
Revelation 9.
Elizabeth and Revelation 9.
Okay, Elizabeth and Revelation. Yeah, we want to go there, but this board is too small. I'm going to keep it simpler. Where's the simple illustration of Islam at these 3 waymarks? Balaam. Okay. So, at the third, when Balaam struck the 3rd time, what does the ass do?
Speaks.
So, how many witnesses do we have that marks the speaking at the Sunday law?
The
Zechariah.
tracking from Revelation 13.
13:11,
And like she says, Zechariah.
Zechariah, and the ass. Okay, so here we have the ass. Here we have the ass. And here we have the ass. What happens here? What do we see here in the second ass?
Doubling it have to be.
He goes
Doubling, what is it? Don't help her. What is the doubling?
What, in the midnight cry time
Yeah.
period?
In the story of Balaam.
Oh, in the doubling, when he came to both sides of the wall?
2 walls. There's 2 walls here. Pardon me?
No, I'm just joining the 2 sticks.
Yeah, the 2 sticks are being joined here, but there's 2 walls here, and what happened? Who's Balaam?
Prophet.
False prophet?
Yeah.
Yeah, Balaam's a false prophet. Who's the false prophet of Bible prophecy? In this
USA.
is the USA. What happens to the false prophet of the United States at the second?
His leg is crippled.
Crushes his foot. What's that mean?
He's
He's crippled.
crippled.
Okay, the United States gets crippled here. Does the decree cause the strike, or does the strike cause the decree?
Strike causes the decree.
Because we have some hidden conspiracy people in this room and probably listening on the internet, we won't deal with the conspiracy ideas at this point. But did the strike of 9/11 precede the decree of the Patriot Act?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a strike coming at
Sort of.
midnight, sort of. See, I know. That's what I'm saying. It was prepared in advance. And maybe it was a Reichstag attack, and on and on and on. We're not dealing with that. The decree comes in response, right?
In an open sense.
Does the ass crash him into the wall before he responds to him?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so there's a decree here because why?
Islam strikes.
Almost there. Because Islam cripples the United States.
Right.
There's a crippling. Okay, so this decree is lining up with that decree.
Where's the crippling, at the midnight cry or something?
The midnight cry.
The midnight cry is the crippling?
Yeah, because he crashes them into one of those
And
2
then
walls.
it totally falls at the Sunday law.
Here, he is fallen.
Yeah.
The ass falls, and Balaam falls with him. This is the fall of the United States at the Sunday law and the beginning of the reign of the 10 kings.
Do we know what the speaking in terms of the ass means? And it's
It's the Sunday law.
no, I know, but what exactly does it mean? If the Islam being the ass, what does it mean that Islam speaks? You know, what does that mean?
It's just
It-
jihad.
The ass there
Strikes again.
strikes again.
He's talking in the sense of
Yeah,
legislative
you're not having. You want Balaam to speak.
I don't want anyone to speak or not speak.
No, I
I'm
mean,
just
but
saying-
that's the.
Well,
There is a speaking at this waymark. The other points of speaking define who speaks here.
Yeah, because we know from Revelation 13 that Balaam speaks, right? And we know from this story of John the Baptist's birth, Zechariah, his father, speaks there. So God's people are speaking, and the United States is speaking, and Islam is speaking.
Well, we know what the other two speakings are. You know, when the United States speaks, it's the son-in-law. When God's people speak, it's the message, the loud cry. That's interesting to know what the speaking of Islam would be at that point. You know, what that would symbolize.
Okay, we don't know that.
No.
But just to add this out, what happens right here?
Probation.
No, in terms of what we're talking about.
3 blessings.
Revelation 13, verses 14 and 15.
Forces.
The image of the
The
beast
image-
is that the
set
image
up
of
in the
the
world.
Close. It's the world image of the beast. And verse 15 says the United States has the power to do what?
Give life.
Give life.
That it should.
Speak.
There's a speaking here.
Yeah.
We should both speak.
Not lie.
This is the world speaking. But anyway, why does, when the ass speaks to Balaam, why does Balaam say that he struck him these 3
He's mocked
times?
him.
That has.
Because he mocked him. In here is the mocking. And the mocking, it's just profound. The mocking, if you go through the mocking in the scriptures, it's so crystal clear that it's this history here. This history here from the midnight cry to the Sunday law. What is Elijah doing to the prophets of Baal and the prophets
He's
of...
got so much.
Maybe you're
He's-
godlessly.
Okay,
God.
when Samson is judged, what happens to him?
They mock him after.
No, when Samson is judged, what happens to him?
His eyes
His
are
eyes
put
are
out.
taken.
His eyes are put out. Whose eyes gets put out?
Zedekiah.
Zedekiah. When is Zedekiah's eyes put out?
Sunday law.
At the Sunday law. So when is Samson's eyes put out?
Sunday law.
At the Sunday law. And in the story of Samson, why is Delilah upset?
Because he mocked her.
Because he mocked her
Why not
And
tell
not
her the
telling her
truth?
this.
these 3 times. And so what does he do? He tells her the truth.
Yeah.
And his eyes get put out. So there's a mocking in here in the story of Samson. Where's another mocking? There's all kinds
There's
of
one
mocking.
yesterday. I was just trying to think.
Balaam, Sodom and Gomorrah. In this history here, Lot is sent back into his sons-in-laws and daughters to tell them to get out of town with him the next morning, and his message was as if he mocked them. Or was it they mocked him? There's a mocking in there.
There's another one that we just got.
The son-in-law mocks Lot.
Pardon me?
The son-in-law mocks Lot for thinking that there was a destruction coming.
Yep, and there's like 50 hits, and every one of them lines up except when you get in the book of Acts.
When the decree goes forward from the midnight cry to the other tribes, they mocked them and laughed them to scorn.
Yeah, up here.
2 Chronicles 30.
Yeah, they mocked him. The ones that would refuse to come to the second Pentecost, they refused this message from Hezekiah. They mocked the messengers.
Why would it
Passover,
change
not Pentecost.
the pattern? Why would it change in that?
Oh well, in Acts, you got Pentecost, which is Sunday law, and after Pentecost arrives, the people that are rejecting the message of Pentecost are saying that these guys are drunk, and
Oh yeah, drunk new wine.
there's a mocking marked there.
Yeah.
And I haven't been able how to figure out how to put it in here when
It's
it
only
says
I
put it
know
in
that,
Pentecost.
I think I know how because the Sunday law, if you look at the Sunday law in the sense that the Sunday law is when Stephen's stoned, and that puts Pentecost back at the midnight cry, and they're going to the Jews, they're going to the Levites at that time, and so the people who are mocking them are Jews. So
Yeah.
the mocking goes from the midnight cry to the Sunday law in that sense of looking at it.
Okay, so even if you use some fractals, you can get that one to fit. But on the other ones, and there's like 50 of them, they all fit. They all fit right here, clear, and add light to it.
What's the overwhelming thing that you get for the mocking? What would you title it as?
It's just marking the midnight cry, image of the beast time period.
Okay, just
Because sometimes the righteous are mocking, Elijah's mocking the prophets of Baal, and sometimes the unrighteous are mocking.
Noah.
just mocking.
Noah.
They're mocking him right up to the door shutting. They're mocking him while the
Even
door's
while he's
shut.
in-
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're mocking him until the ring.
I don't know that the scriptures say that, but Sister
Oh.
White probably uses that word.
Yeah, they don't use the word
So
mock.
you're using it as a prophetic marker.
Line upon line. William Miller's rules. You take mock and you run it, and it'll open your
The
mind.
children mocked God.
Yeah, there's the other one. Elisha.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to judge those children
The
because
she-bears
they've been
down.
mocking him.
Yeah.
Go to ye old bald head or
Go up
whatever.
that bald head. That's what they say.
And it there's a repetition in there. It's go ye two or something, right?
And there's two bears.
Go up thou, go up
And
thou.
there's
There's
bald
two
head.
bears.
Go up thou, bald head.
Go up thou bald head, go up thou bald head. There's a doubling as they mock Elisha.
Yeah.
So so the walls, the double walls here, we know that here there's a wall. What's the wall here?
It's the Constitution, separation of church and state.
Separation of church and state. This is a wall. This is a wall too. What's this wall? This is Revelation 13, 14, and 15. What's this wall? When the people that are the globalists discuss how they're going to take over the world and put it into a one world government, they say there's an obstacle that they need to overcome. It's their words.
This little group of people.
It's the wall of national sovereignty. They have to get every country to surrender its individual national sovereignty to implement a one world government. And when the globalists speak of this, they call it the wall of national sovereignty. It gets overcome here.
We were talking about this a while ago, several days ago, but marriage is a wall against for the marriage union. It was a wall.
There's a wall in the marriage union.
Around, yeah.
And what does that wall protect?
Humanity.
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 Yeah.
And there's a wall that is the law of the God, of the law of God. The law of God is a wall.
Yeah.
And what's the symbol of the law of God as a wall? The Sabbath.
Sabbath.
The Sabbath is the symbol of that. So and the Sabbath is one of the institutions that was created in Eden, and marriage is the other institution that was created in Eden. Which institution was put in place first?
The marriage.
Marriage first, then the Sabbath. Why?
You gotta do God
Rested on the
first.
seventh day.
Pardon me?
God
He rested on the seventh day. What happened on the sixth day?
He created man.
He created man. Male and female, he created them. So marriage, sixth day, first institution, Sabbath, seventh day, Sunday law, midnight cry.
But really, that's just on a big level, on a realistic level. Adam was in the garden alone for the first Sabbath.
Really?
He had to have time alone to recognize his want for a partner.
What?
Really?
That's of the Bible.
You need to go read it again.
There's no time.
You need to go read it again.
He names the animals on the sixth day, and he's lonely after he names the animals, and on the seventh, it's right towards
Yeah, it does.
Before the seventh.
before the seventh.
Before the
day.
seventh,
That's-
she's created.
No, you
That's
can read.
right.
Yeah, you can read it at a straight and wonder, was Eve actually created on that first day? But if you read on into chapter 2 and 3, she was made that sixth day.
Sister White doesn't say that.
Sister White backs that up.
Yeah,
Okay.
she confirms it.
So these two institutions are represented by the midnight cry, testing time, and the Sunday law, testing time. The Sabbath is the first institution. The marriage is the
Other way around.
yeah.
So
The
there's
Sabbath's
a
the
wall
second.
at
Marriage is
every
the first.
spot, but at 9/11.
Yeah, we're dealing with the wall. I'm trying to deal with the walls now, and I'm running out of time. There's a wall of national sovereignty here at the universal Sunday law time period. The wall of separation of church and state. Is this a wall at 9/11?
Has
I mean, it makes sense. I don't know that anyone calls it. I mean, English law is a protection against Roman law. But anyway, is there a wall back here?
Yeah, it's the Iron Curtain.
Yeah, that's when it came
Yeah.
down.
The wall of the Iron Curtain.
Came
At
down.
midnight.
There's a logic to this being a wall. Is there a wall at the midnight cry?
Actually,
Yeah, because you said it was marriage, right?
Well, no, we're speculating that that is it. But do we have a prophetic marker of the midnight cry of a wall? We've already dealt with it in this class today.
The marriage.
Balaam's two walls. There's two walls right here in the story of Balaam. But with the story of Balaam, you have Islam associated with the story of Balaam and the walls. Do we have another wall that's associated with Islam?
Constantinople.
Constantinople. We can bring Revelation 9 into here now. And what happened in 1453? The walls of Constantinople came down. Why?
National apostasy.
Because it is.
Because of Islam. And how long did it take Islam to bring down the wall of Constantinople?
Not that long.
4 years.
That's when they.
From 1449 to 1453. So when the wall of Constantinople comes down in Revelation 9, where do we start Revelation 9? Revelation 9 starts when the keys turn. When's the key turned?
1989.
1989. And what's the prophecies in Revelation 9? What's the key? What's the key in Revelation 9?
Key is an understanding.
What's the key in Revelation 9?
Increase of knowledge.
Muhammad.
What's the key in Revelation 9?
Fifth angel sounded.
What's the key in Revelation 9 that is typified by the Battle of Carchemish and Daniel 11 verse 40?
It's
The king of the north, king of the
It's
south.
the Battle of Nineveh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
That's the key. Why is that a key? Long drawn out war between Persia and Rome. And when the Battle of Nineveh comes, what happens? Persia is defeated and Rome is depleted of power, and that's the key that's turned.
I thought we said the key was the knowledge that Muhammad knew, and he could take advantage of this event.
You may have said that. And
We had the notes.
key is a knowledge in the scriptures, and I use those notes to identify that knowledge is a key, particularly that the Pharisees rejected. But the key that brings Islam into history was the Battle of Nineveh that depleted the power of anyone ceasing their rise. That's the pioneer understanding. And if you're going to say it's knowledge, then suddenly the Battle of Carchemish doesn't mean a whole lot. Neither does the Battle of 1989.
It's also though that Muhammad knew.
He knew that
beforehand
to
And
what
he
would
even
happen.
did
And he went
9/11
and
then,
warned. He
because
went
that's
and
what
warned
brought it
the
to.
people of
You
Nineveh.
think that's what depleted the power of Rome, Persia? The fact that he had foreknowledge
No, not depleted.
isn't the key.
Not that he depleted.
The key is the depletion of the power.
Which Islam does each time.
that allows them to rise.
Yeah, there's no counterbalance to protect them from rising.
Yeah.
And if you go into the realm of knowledge on that subject, it's part of the story, but it makes it more difficult to claim that the Battle of Nineveh typifies the Battle of 1989, which was typified by the Battle of Carchemish. It's battle, battle, battle. It's the battle that is the key.
In 9/11.
Yeah. No.
Which
No, we're
almost-
talking Revelation 9.
I'm talking about it crippling.
No, Revelation 9. A key is turned.
Okay.
The Battle of Nineveh. And it begins what? The fifth trumpet. When does the
First one.
when does the first war begin?
9/11.
9/11? Okay, but when does the sixth trumpet begin?
1989.
The fifth.
Or fifth trumpet.
Fifth trumpet. Is it 606?
Yeah, I think so. It's on the chart right there.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
606.
606.
It's not a hard one. Okay, 606. When does the 150 years begin?
9/11.
July 27th. You guys, you're going to flounder on Sunday. It took July 27th, 1299. And how long does that go?
150.
5 months.
150 years to 1449.
Yeah, we're cheating.
July 27th, 1449.
Oh, that's the 6th.
And what begins then? The
The
second woe and the sixth trumpet. And when's the second woe end?
8/11/40.
8/11/40.
But the sixth trumpet ends on October 22nd, 44.
And it ends on October 22nd, 1844.
Still sounding.
10/22, 1844. What's 10/22, 1844?
The beginning of
The begin.
Judgment of the dead.
It's the Day of Atonement, and it typifies what? The Sunday law. It's the perfect fulfillment of the Sunday law. So as we go back into these histories, and we're out of time, there's a wall that we're going to deal with here that corresponds to this wall. There are witnesses to these walls, other than Balaam's walls and the historical acknowledgement of the wall of separation in church and state. And I've looked for the one, I have the one on the wall of marriage, and it's not that good. I used it in the sermon I did, but it's not what I'm looking for. Sister Kathy, pray.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this beautiful day you've given us. We thank you for the opportunity to press together, learning your keys that open up the Bible and opens up our minds and our hearts to you if we would allow it. We ask Heavenly Father now for your Holy Spirit. Teach us the things we need to know and help us to apply them in our daily lives with the people around us. Now, Heavenly Father, be with each one of us as we part and bring us all back here safely tomorrow morning. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.